Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just No HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
Recalled and removed our tyrannical HOA board. Part 4 to 6. After I revealed that the board had been falsifying meeting minutes and election results combined with their behavior at the annual meeting, their reputation in the community was at an all-time low, so for a few months once again things were relatively quiet. A few months later we all received a rather large package in the mail from Star Management Company. Since the HOA only has 99 houses and very little common, or we had been self-managed, so none of us knew who Star Management was. Well, it appeared that the HOA had decided to hire a management company without telling anyone. After talking about the new management company, there followed several pages of new architectural guidelines. When built, the only color option was white. Over the years this had been expanded to include various shades of tan and brown, but McFife was now paring back the choices with the goal of eventually returning to only white. And then what followed were 15 pages of newly created use restriction after use restriction after use restriction. The new rules that they had just made up micromanage every single aspect of your property, front, back, what you can have inside your garage, how long you can leave your garage door open, and they were trying to dictate the inside of the house too. Essentially these are the CC&Rs that our very own version of Barney Fife wishes he had at his disposal, but since they didn't exist, he just created them up entirely out of thin air. Needless to say, several of us were on the phone to an attorney the very next day. The two attorneys that reviewed the documents were literally laughing and shaking their heads as they read it. They stated that either they just manufactured this themselves, or, if they paid someone for this, they need to ask for their money back. The guidelines were so vague and flexible that it gave the board the ability to fine anyone, for anything, at any time that they wanted to, at their discretion. The interpretations could vary from year to year and member to member depending on the whims of the then current board, leaving the homeowners in the dark as to whether they were in violation of any given rule until they start receiving violation letters. And then who knows, maybe the next board will interpret it differently. Fully 90% of the houses were in violation of something under the new rules. Most houses had multiple violations. Many of the rules were specifically crafted to target certain people in the community that they didn't like. There were at least 3 rules that were created just for me. As written, and ratified, in our attorney's opinion, if they actually attempted to enforce most of this, they would have been opening themselves up for repeated lawsuits. In addition, the management company wasn't even going to be handling the billing. They were specifically hired by the board for the purpose of enforcing their new rules and assessing fines because they didn't have the guts to face the homeowners themselves. We all knew that they were going to be providing them with a hit list of the people that they wanted to go after, while their friends and neighbors would remain exempt because that was consistent with their previous track record, and there was nothing to indicate that this would change. Word of what they had done spread like wildfire. I had furious people stopping me in the street, emailing, calling, showing up at the front door, all saying similar things. Who the hell do these people think they are, and what can we do about it? If these were the rules that were in effect when I looked at this house, I never would have bought it. I would have told the agent to keep looking. I won't live under this BS, I'll move first. An open meeting was scheduled a few weeks out and we were all anticipating exactly what would transpire. Part 5. The open board meeting. The board, the new management company that they just hired to enforce all of the fines that they planned on sending out, that they hired without our knowledge, and the HOA attorney, they also had a cop there as well, were all there in addition to at least 25 homeowners. As unhappy as the majority of the homeowners in attendance were, they were overall pretty respectful and reasonable. The board, their attorney, and the management company on the other hand came off terribly. They were confrontational, arrogant, evasive, dismissive, and right from the start clearly adopted an adversarial us versus them mentality. We really didn't have to say very much because their own words and demeanor turned more people against them than anything that we could have said would. The first step towards removing the board is to have a petition signed by 25% of the homeowners calling for their removal, 25 people in our case. We already had the petitions prepared, and in the hallway after the meeting we had furious people lining up and jostling for position to sign it. There were people in attendance who have never been to a board meeting in the 20 to 30 years that they've lived here who showed up completely outraged by what has been transpiring. Of the 5 board members, one of our neighbors was the only nice and reasonable one. One of our friends pulled her aside after the meeting and asked her if she was in agreement with what was going on, and she said, "No, I'm not any happier about this than you are." Our friend asked her why she was even on the board if she didn't have the spine to voice her opinion, and if she was just going to vote whichever way that she was told to by McFife, she may as well just resign. One of the homeowners does the bookkeeping, gets paid $6,000 a year for it too. He showed up late from work, was visibly angry, asked a few questions, was blown off by the board and stormed out. My wife caught him outside and he was the first to sign the petition for their removal. Off the top of my head, of the 25 residents in attendance, we obtained 22 signatures, not counting the board of course. The problem was that we knew for a fact that they would try to rig the election by stuffing the ballot box, making ballots disappear, try to schedule the meetings and subsequent election on a holiday to try to prevent us from getting the 20 attendees needed for a quorum for the removal of the board, etc. To show you how out of control this is, the state law is that you have 21 days to contact the board to appeal a violation notice. They changed it to 5 days from the date of the violation. You actually have 5 days to contact them by certified mail minus however long it took you to get the violation letter, so basically, they've all but eliminated the appeal process. It would seem to me that even if you were legitimately in violation of something, if they refused you a hearing because it took you 7 days to contact them, that they would be in violation of the state law and that you could get off on a technicality. They couldn't or wouldn't give a straight answer to anything. The lawyer frequently got up and pontificated at length, deflecting the question by droning on and on about something else. When asked about the questionable 5-day appeal process or asked direct questions about the ludicrous new use restrictions and how they were going to enforce them, they gave vague, wishy-washy answers like, "Well, we'll consider it case by case. It's a living document subject to amending at any given time. We can't answer that, we'll have to play it by ear," etc. In other words, we're just going to make it up as we go. Days after the meeting, when they found out that a petition was being circulated, they released another of their infamous newsletters, which previously had been used as a sounding board by them to personally attack us for 9 months straight. It quickly degenerated into a 5-page hysterical rant as they became more and more unhinged, which only confirmed everything that we had been telling people for the previous 9 months. They carried on about how every board before they took over was derelict and incompetent. The community was spiraling into the toilet and they heroically rode in and saved the day for us all. How this community survived for over 30 years without them, we'll never know. Our attorney described it as sanctimonious. They also featured my wife and I in another of their near-monthly personal attacks, essentially painting us out as absentee owners who have literally not done any maintenance to the property in a decade. Of course, none of these allegations have any basis in reality. Things ran far better under the previous boards, and we personally put in a good $50,000 into improvements to the property since we owned it and had never paid a single penny in fines in 20 years of living in an HOA. The only reason that we didn't file a civil suit for defamation and harassment, as it would have been counterproductive to do so at that time, as the main goal was getting them removed. We eventually ended up getting 55 signatures, out of 99 houses, well over the minimum 25 that we needed. The one reasonable board member that we knew resigned over the whole situation. The homeowner who has been doing the bookkeeping resigned, and the management company that they hired wanted out too. One of our friends called the management company and they told her that they didn't feel that the board had been honest with them, and when they saw that a large percentage of the homeowners were furious with the board, they wanted out. The board was required by law to schedule a meeting where we would be voting to determine on whether or not the remaining 4 board members would be removed or not. The board took a business as usual position and just stuck their heads in the sand, trying to act as if nothing was going on. We anticipated that they would try to push the meeting and vote out as long as possible and hope that things cool down, people go out of town for the summer, etc. And that maybe they can manage to avoid being removed if apathy sets in and people won't show up to the meeting or bother to vote. We also knew that this was really only a short-term solution that basically just kicked the problem down the road for someone else to deal with later. Once things settle down, inevitably homeowner complacency and apathy sets in. People don't go to meetings, they don't vote in board elections, won't run for the board, and eventually the same idiots will get back on the board the same way that they got on in the first place. They'll run uncontested. But in the short term we still lived there, and just trying to sell our house with those new rules in effect would make it more difficult. Early on, our attorney tried to reason with the board and their attorney, and they basically told us to go duck off and challenged us to take them to court, not considering that we could just go the recall route and get them all removed. I did a search on the attorney that the board was using and found at least 4 articles where she had represented an HOA board against a lawsuit by the homeowners, so this is just what she does. After it all hit the fan, she lied to her boss in an email that I saw, trying to cover her tracks, and claimed that she wasn't kept informed of what the old board had been up to. The problem is that we had her on tape at one of the meeting preaching at length, basically telling us and the board that this was a dictatorship and that they had the power to just make up whatever they wanted and there wasn't anything that we could do about it. How wrong they later found out they were. They're lucky that it didn't end up in court. We had concrete proof of the attorney's lies and of the board committing fraud and falsified meeting minutes and election results. And they knew that I knew all of the above, and they also knew that we weren't going to back down or go away, so they really had no other option than to follow through with the recall election. Part 6: Takedown. In the weeks leading up to the recall election, they released a few more of their notorious newsletters, the last of which was a 4-page tirade filled with the usual personal attacks that I had come to expect on a monthly basis now, along with fear-based attempts to scare people into not removing them by claiming that the community would spiral into the toilet without them to lead us. It was filled with so many half-truths, things taken out of context, and outright lies that it would take an hour to try to address it all. They were also making highly inflated claims of the legal costs that they claimed that we were causing them to incur. They did, however, rack up $6,000 in legal fees creating all of the new rules, and then rolled up another $4,000 plus in legal fees, fighting tooth and nail not to get thrown out. Later on, after McFife was removed, he caused the HOA to incur an additional $2,000 plus in legal fees because he kept sending threatening letters to the new board members' houses, the management company, the HOA attorney, putting up a website, sending out flyers to the whole community with pictures of all of the things that he didn't like, etc. They were doing exactly what I expected of them, reacting like children having a tantrum. They decided to go out kicking and screaming, racking up bills that the budget couldn't afford, all to pursue their personal agenda and to maintain their position on the board at any and all costs. They never showed up to the recall election, and the attorney and staff ran things. As expected, they tried to rig the election with bogus mail-in ballots. It wasn't too hard to figure out about a half dozen or so snowbirds, absentee owners, etc. who are almost certainly out of town and not likely to show up or to vote. We also knew that it wouldn't do them any good. In the end, it didn't matter. The 4 of them lost by a landslide and were all removed. An election was scheduled to appoint a new board. The conclusion of the meeting was pretty funny because I happened to be standing by the exit door and everyone wanted to shake my hand on the way out like it was a receiving line. At least a half a dozen people came up afterwards and said that they wanted to personally thank me for all of the time and hard work that I put in to get this done, which I appreciated. We anticipated that the now former board members would still try to find some way that they could contest the results, but they never did, as they had no legal basis on which they could. A new board was elected after the recall. McFife attempted to run even though he was just thrown out and wasn't eligible. To add insult to injury, my wife got elected, and by accident or design she had the honor, at the next board meeting, of detailing to everyone how all of the crazy rules that the old board dreamt up had been removed. Among the many things wrong with what they did, the old board essentially committed fraud with the paperwork that had been filed. At the first meeting of the new board, the new HOA attorney stated that it was virtually unheard of for two people to get an entire board removed. And that it must have been a lot of work. No shit. It cost us at $5,000 plus in legal fees, and at times I was devoting 25 to 30 hours a week on it. In the following months, McFife seemed to become more and more unhinged. He started sending threatening and harassing letters to the board members' homes, the management company and the HOA attorney. The attorney dealt with him, but when he didn't get what he wanted, his crazy rules reinstated, he completely lost it. He and his wife started regularly patrolling the neighborhood, clipboards and cameras in hand. We still hadn't sold our old house yet, and at one point our agent got a call from an agent that had just tried to show the house. Apparently McFife confronted them and the potential buyers in our driveway, telling them, "If you buy this house, you had better maintain it the way I like. The previous owners have been warned repeatedly, and now so have you." Needless to say, it didn't give the buyers the best impression of the neighborhood. I had to email him and told him that if I got another call that the agents and buyers were being harassed, that I would call our attorney and have a restraining order taken out against him, and that seemed to put an end to it. Everyone was wondering what he was up to, but for the most part just ignored him. A few months later he was at it again, this time sending out a multi-page tirade filled with wild claims, conspiracy theories concerning the new board. He demanding that his rules be put back into place, claimed that he had been defamed and was now expecting an apology, posted pictures of all of the houses that they didn't approve of, claimed that the whole place was spiraling down the toilet since they were removed and was on the verge of becoming a ghetto, and that only by reinstating his rules and the old board would they be able to bring it back from the abyss. In addition, he also claimed that every previous board was derelict in their duties and only he and his minions knew what was best for the community. He went so far as to put up a website dedicated to this insanity. It looked a bit like the old TimeCube website, all different types of fonts of various colors and sizes. McFife was strutting around the neighborhood extraordinarily pleased with himself, as if he had actually accomplished something significant. The rest of the neighborhood was not so impressed or pleased with it all, particularly the homeowners whose houses were photographed and featured in his newsletter and website. To illustrate the level of dishonesty going on, one of the residents had a flat tire and had jacked up the car to put the spare on. McFife photographed the car on the jack and featured it to try to make it look as if it had been that way for months. The next board meeting was coming up, and I think that he had the idea that he was going to turn the community against the new board, but what he got was a room full of angry people who specifically showed up so that they could yell at him. Another of the former board members almost got into a fight at the end of the meeting with one of the other homeowners. For his part, McFife slunk out at the end of the meeting, getting cursed at by some of the residents as he left. His website wasn't up for very long because the dummy posted videos that he had taken of the last few board meetings online without permission, so we were able to get his domain name taken away. But you apparently can't keep a good cook down, because McFife was undeterred and he and one of his minions ran for the board again at the next election. Out of 30 votes cast, he and his puppet only received 3 votes. He pretty much dug his own grave with that last newsletter and the website. What little support that he may have had was now gone, and he and his wife were officially the pariahs of the neighborhood. At the end of the meeting he got up with a prepared statement that he had copies of for anyone who wanted it. My wife had had enough and wasn't going to be subjected to any more of this nuts rambling, so she just got up and said, "That's it, I'm officially done with this," and walked out since her duties as secretary were over. Of course, I don't doubt that he'll try again next year, but it's no longer our problem since we finally did sell our old house. The end. Thanks for listening.